So, you want to own an Amish furniture business. You picture a quiet workshop where skilled hands turn raw hardwood into heirloom tables that sell for thousands of dollars. Customers pay a premium for quality that lasts generations. The brand sells itself. The competition barely exists. It feels like buying into American craftsmanship at its most honest and most profitable. It is not. Before you sell a single table, you have to be approved by a community that does not use the internet, does not take cold calls, and has no obvious reason to let you in. The franchise fee is $40,000. The gate that actually matters does not cost money at all. Here is what that looks like in actual dollars. The one-time franchise fee for AmishBuiltFurniture.com, the world's largest Amish furniture retailer, is $40,000. The total initial investment runs from $100,000 to $200,000. That covers your showroom, your floor samples, your training, and your marketing materials. It does not cover the one thing you actually need to open the doors. The Amish finish school at the 8th grade. They do not have email. They do not have websites. They do not answer the phone in the shop, because there is no phone in the shop. They do not have a chamber of commerce or a business licensing board you can call. They have bishops, they have church districts, and they have an unwritten code called the Ordnung that decides what technology they may use and who they are allowed to work with. So a non-Amish buyer like you cannot walk into Holmes County, Ohio, and start placing orders. You cannot email a workshop that has no email. You cannot call a shop that has no phone. You have to drive there, introduce yourself in person, and hope they decide to trust you. And that trust is not measured in months. The successful retailers in this space measure their relationships in decades. Mike Finlaw of Oak Creations works directly with more than 150 Amish builders. He built those connections over 25 years of showing up, paying on time, and never treating a craftsman as an interchangeable vendor. So the franchise fee is $40,000, and the showroom build-out is another $100,000 to $200,000. But the real cost is invisible. You cannot buy a relationship with a community that has survived for 3 centuries, precisely by refusing to sell out. Money is only the first problem. The second problem is that you are an outsider asking to be led into a closed economy, and it has no reason to open. Now say you find a way in. You build the relationship. You sign the franchise agreement. You open your showroom. The obvious question is not where the customers come from. The obvious question is what happens the day the craftsman you depend on decides to stop working with you. That sounds simple until you ask who actually owns the supply. The Amish furniture industry runs on a handshake economy. There are no long-term supply contracts. There are no exclusivity clauses. There is no purchase order system that guarantees delivery. The builder you rely on can simply decide to send his production to a retailer he has known for 30 years instead of you. Nothing about that is a breach of anything, because you never had a contract to begin with. Consider Dutch Crafters, one of the largest online sellers of Amish furniture. They work with more than 150 wood shops, and they do not own a single one. They do not control production schedules. They do not set prices on the workshop floor. They are a marketing company that routes orders to independent craftsmen who can refuse those orders at any time. The same is true for JMX Brands, which operates Dutch Crafters and generates over $6 million a year in revenue from a Sarasota office with no showroom at all. They route orders to 190 Amish craft shops, but those shops also sell to other retailers, and they sell directly to walk-in customers. You are not their only outlet. You are one of many. So your showroom becomes a gallery for products you do not control. If a builder decides to prioritize his own retail customers, your lead times stretch from weeks to months. If a builder retires and his sons choose a different trade, your supply line simply vanishes, and there is no replacement waiting in a catalog. You are not buying a supply chain. You are renting access to one, and the rent can be revoked without notice. This is where ownership stops being control. You own the franchise license. You own the lease. You own the inventory on your showroom floor. But the thing your customers are actually paying for, the handcrafted furniture itself, comes from a workshop you will never own and cannot direct. The Amish furniture cluster in Ohio employs an estimated 2,991 people across hundreds of tiny shops. The median shop has 4 workers. The typical wholesale distributor has a median of 5.5 employees and was founded in 1997. These are not factories you can acquire. They are family operations that will outlast any franchise agreement you sign. And the trust that holds them together is not transferable. You cannot buy it. You cannot inherit it automatically. You cannot write it into the asset purchase agreement when you sell the business. Look at Jake Graber, an Amish furniture business owner in Jamesport, Missouri. After health problems, he passed his company to his son John. The son had to learn every relationship from scratch. The dealers who trusted the father had to decide whether to trust the son. Some did, some did not. The business survived, but the transition was not automatic, and it never is. You can see the same wall in the numbers of everyone who succeeded. When Mel Stutzman built Countryside Amish Furniture into a $3 million e-commerce business, he did not own a single workshop. He owned a website, a reputation, and relationships with builders who trusted him because he was raised Amish and understood their values. You are not Mel Stutzman. You are a franchisee who paid a fee for the right to use a brand name, and the builders have no loyalty to your brand. They are loyal to the people they have known for decades. That is why the Simply Amish franchise operates exactly one location after decades in business. The reason it never scaled is not weak demand. The reason is that the supply chain cannot be copied. The craftsmen are not employees. They are independent operators who choose which retailers to supply. You own the showroom. The craftsman owns the bottleneck, and the bottleneck is not for sale. Now the math gets uncomfortable. Say you sell a dining table for $5,000. The customer pays by credit card, so the processing fee takes $150. The builder charged you $2,800 for the piece. The delivery truck costs $200. Your salesperson's commission takes another $300. You are left with $1,550, and that is before rent, before utilities, before the franchise royalty, and before you pay yourself a cent. Revenue is not profit. Revenue is the number you put on the sign. Profit is what leaks through a dozen holes in the pipe. The typical retail furniture store in the United States runs on a gross margin of 35 to 45%. After rent, payroll, marketing, insurance, and debt service, the net margin settles between 3 and 6%. That means for every $100 a customer hands you, you keep between 3 and 6. On $200,000 of revenue in a year, you take home $12,000. That is less than a full-time job at a warehouse. And the fixed costs are heavier than the fantasy admits. Rent for a 1,200 square foot showroom in a decent retail corridor runs $4,000 a month. Payroll for 2 employees adds another $5,000. Utilities, insurance, and software subscriptions eat another $1,000. You have not paid the franchise royalty yet. That royalty, typically 6% of gross revenue, comes off the top before you calculate your own take. The $40,000 fee was just the price of entering the game. The royalty is the price of staying in it. Let me walk the full waterfall on a bad ticket, because this is where it turns from a thin margin into a real loss. A customer orders a custom cherry dining set for $8,000. The builder charges you $4,800. The card processor takes $240. Delivery costs $300. The commission is $400. That month's share of showroom rent is $2,000. Utilities are $400. The 6% royalty is $480. Add it up and you are left with negative $720 on that sale before you pay yourself. That is not a profit problem. That is a structural loss problem. And it gets worse when the customer takes 60 days to pay or the builder demands a 50% deposit up front. So who wins at this math? Not the showroom. JMX Brands, operating as Dutch crafters, routes over $6 million a year in orders to 190 craft shops with no showroom, no retail lease, and no sales floor staff. Their overhead is a fraction of yours, and they still have to fight for every point of margin. You are competing against a business model that requires no building, against craftsmen who sell direct, and against online platforms that aggregate demand across hundreds of shops. Even the headline wins are traps. The Amish Craftsman, a single-location retailer in Pennsylvania, pulled $200,000 in revenue over one Labor Day weekend. That sounds impressive until you run the stack. The marketing campaign that drove it cost tens of thousands. The inventory had to be ordered months in advance. The delivery required hired drivers. Here is what the ceiling really looks like. The typical furniture store in the United States generates about $68 billion in revenue across 28,000 locations, an average of about $2.4 million per store. At a net margin of 3 to 6%, the owner of an average store takes home between $72,000 and $144,000 a year. That is the ceiling. It only arrives when everything goes right, when builders deliver on time, when customers pay on time, when the housing market cooperates, and when the franchise does not raise the royalty. The floor is much lower, and the floor is where most owners live. To take home $100,000 at a 6% margin, you have to sell more than $1,600,000 of furniture. That means custom pieces taking 8 to 12 weeks to deliver, with your working capital tied up in inventory that sits on the floor while customers browse and walk out. So why would anyone do this? Because the real money is not where the customer thinks it is. The sign outside says furniture. The profit hides somewhere else. Start with the financing. Many Amish furniture retailers offer special financing. The customer signs a contract at around 12% annual interest over 36 months. The retailer then sells that contract to a third-party lender for a fee, typically 3 to 5% of the total financed amount. That fee is pure margin. It requires no inventory, no delivery, and no builder relationship. A customer finances a $7,000 bedroom set, and the lender pays you $350 for originating the loan. You did not build the bed. You did not deliver the dresser. You handed the customer a form. Then there is the design consultation. Retailers like Homestead Furniture in Berlin, Ohio offer free consultations. But free is a marketing word. The consultation is a sales tool, and the conversion rate for customers who receive one is roughly double the rate for those who do not. It never appears on the income statement as a line item. It appears as a higher average order value, because customers who work with a designer spend about 40% more than customers who shop alone. That 40% is hidden profit pulled through the same cost stack. The craftsmen have their own version of this. A builder will install a concealed drawer in a coffee table for about $40 in extra materials, and the retailer sells that secret compartment for an extra $300. The margin on the secrecy is roughly 700%. No one advertises it and no one discounts it, because the customer does not know to ask. The biggest hidden margin, though, is the material the customer never notices. Walk to the back corner and look at the Poly outdoor furniture. It is made from recycled plastic lumber that costs roughly 40% less to manufacture than solid hardwood, and it retails for nearly the same price. The gross margin on a Poly Adirondack chair can reach 70%, against about 50% on a cherry rocker. Luxcraft, a Sugar Creek area company, was an early leader here. They applied the same craftsmanship reputation to a material that weathers better and costs less to produce. The customer pays for the Amish brand. The product cost belongs to a plastic extrusion line. There is also a channel the customer never visits. Myron Miller of Four Corners Furniture in Millersburg, Ohio, runs two separate entities, one retail and one wholesale. The wholesale operation sells directly to 75 dealers across the country, with no showroom cost, no sales commission, and no customer financing. The margin is thinner, but the overhead is nearly zero, and he markets through a hardwood furniture guild instead of paying for a website. And on the builder side, Alan Miller runs a 30,000 square foot furniture factory in Dundee, Ohio with 40 employees. His power comes from a natural gas generator instead of the utility grid, which lets him avoid monthly electric bills that run into the thousands. But every hidden profit has a mirror image sitting under the same floor. For every margin you gain by substituting poly for cherry, you risk a customer who discovers the difference. For every wholesale channel you build, you create a competitor who can undercut your retail price. For every energy cost the builder avoids, he accepts a reliability risk, because when the generator fails, production stops. And there is a hidden loss center that runs quietly against every one of those gains. It starts with inventory that does not move. Amish furniture is built to order, but every showroom carries floor samples, and those samples are not free. A sample dining table that cost you $2,000 and sits on the floor for 18 months is a $2,000 loan you made to yourself at zero interest. That costs you roughly $300 in lost investment return, and more the longer it sits. Add delivery damage. One scratch on a hand-finished table means you discount it by 30%, and the margin on that table evaporates. The largest hidden loss, though, is a global supply chain hiding inside a local product. The hardwood lumber is local. The Ohio cluster alone consumes 44 million board feet a year, about 11% of all hardwood produced in the state. But the drawer slides come from Asia, and the knobs come from Europe. When the container ships stopped in 2022, lead times doubled, and prices rose by about 25%. Spencer Thompson of Thompson Furniture in Columbus, Indiana, told Your Source News that Amish brands face the same delays as every other domestic supplier. The customer does not see the bottleneck. The customer sees a 12-week delivery promise that becomes 24 weeks, and then asks for a refund because they got tired of waiting. The sign outside says handcrafted American furniture. The supply chain inside says something else entirely. None of this is theory. It is already played out in public. Take Kimberly and Steve Murphy, who owned the Amish Craftsman, a single-location furniture and home decor retailer. For years, they tested different messages, offers, and campaigns, and sales stagnated, and they could not figure out why. A marketing firm ran consumer research and found the problem. More than half of the participants, 53%, did not know their preferred furniture styles were Amish-made until they were told. Customers were walking straight past the product because the label did not match the expectation. So the Murphys changed the message. They showed families living their lives around the furniture instead of showing the joinery. During a Labor Day sale, they pulled in $200,000 in a single weekend, while store foot traffic tripled. That sounds like a happy ending, but it is not a business model. It is a marketing fix for a positioning problem that should not exist in the first place. Now look at JMX Brands from the inside. Jim Miller and his wife Linz run the company from Sarasota, Florida with no showroom. They route orders to 190 Amish craft shops across Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania and generate more than $6 million a year. No showroom lease, no floor samples, no sales commission, no customer financing. The entire cost stack is marketing, logistics, and the builder markup. And the profit center is the channel itself. Then look at the human side of survival. When Jake Graber survived an aneurysm and passed his business to his son John, John told a reporter he was starting to see the pressures his father had carried all those years. He had thought his father was grouchy. Now he understood why. That is the real evidence for this industry. The business survives because the family absorbs the pressure, and it fails when there is no family to absorb it. Which points at the number that looks like the strongest argument for buying in, and is actually the trap. Donald Craybill studied Amish business failure rates across several settlements and found rates between 2.6 and 4.2%. Compare that to the roughly 50% of ordinary small businesses that fail within 5 years, and it looks like a miracle. But those numbers measure Amish-owned businesses run by Amish owners. They do not measure a non-Amish buyer who purchases a showroom and tries to replicate the model. The low failure rate is not a feature of the furniture. It is a feature of the community. The church district provides credit, labor, and moral enforcement. The bishop can pressure a delinquent debtor. The family provides unpaid labor. When you buy the showroom, you do not buy the community. You buy the furniture. And the furniture does not enforce payment or provide free labor. And this is where the government, the insurer, and the courtroom stop being background noise and become the business. The risk is not visible from the street. You walk in, you see solid wood tables, hand-rubbed finishes, and a sign that says heirloom quality. And you do not see the liability sitting under the floorboards. Amish business owners traditionally reject commercial insurance on religious grounds because they believe filing a claim violates biblical principles. Atlee Kaufman, who runs a furniture parts store in Ohio, pays roughly $4,000 a year in workers' compensation premiums and told a reporter he will never file a claim. That works for Atlee because his community absorbs the loss. It does not work for you. The State Labor Commissioner of New York made the line crystal clear. The Amish are not exempt from carrying liability insurance when they conduct business ventures for profit, and a non-Amish owner cannot claim a religious exemption at all. You carry the full stack. One contractor in upstate New York described the math. Liability insurance and employee benefits represent about 40% of his payroll costs. So a non-Amish owner competing against an Amish builder who skips insurance faces a 40% cost disadvantage on every single job. And the downside is not abstract. In one documented case, a furniture delivery driver knocked on a door and was shot. The employer did not carry enough insurance to cover the required benefits, and the business lost everything. The Amish have a different answer. They run community aid programs and pay medical bills in cash, and hospitals in Amish country negotiate lower prices for cash payments because there is no insurance paperwork involved. The system works because the community enforces payment. You do not have a community that enforces payment. You have a limited liability company and a general liability policy with a $1 million cap. One catastrophic event and the cap is gone. Suppose you survive all of it and decide to sell. Buying in is easier than getting out cleanly. The furniture retail sector holds nearly 28,000 stores and over $68 billion in revenue. So in theory, a buyer could come from anywhere. But the buyer pool for an Amish furniture showroom is narrow. You are not selling a technology platform with recurring revenue. You are selling a lease, an inventory of hardwood tables, and a relationship with builders who never signed an exclusive contract. They can walk away the day the sale closes, leaving the new owner to rebuild every relationship from scratch. Then apply the multiples. Furniture stores typically sell for 4 to 7 times earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That sounds reasonable until you put it against your actual margin. On $1 million of revenue at a 3 to 6% net margin, your profit is roughly $40,000. A 4 times multiple on $40,000 is $160,000. That is less than the initial franchise fee on some of these brands. Scale does not rescue the math. A store doing $3 million at a 5% margin earns $150,000. At a 6 times multiple, the business is worth $900,000, until you subtract the debt you used to buy the inventory and the lease obligations you cannot transfer. And you cannot choose your moment. Marcus Bontrager, president of Fusion Designs in Indiana, told Furniture Today in 2024 that low consumer demand is the crux of the problem. Housing interest rates are keeping buyers on the sidelines. When people do not move, they do not buy dining tables. You are selling a discretionary purchase tied to the housing market, consumer confidence, and credit availability. And when any of those three tighten, your revenue drops while your fixed costs do not. You cannot exit into a frozen market. You can only hold and wait. There is a growth story on paper, and it is worth naming because it is the last thing a broker will show you. The customized furniture market is projected to grow from $31 billion to $87 billion by 2031. That demand is real, but capturing it requires e-commerce capability, digital marketing, and a supply chain that delivers custom pieces in weeks and not months. And you do not own any of those capabilities. You do not control the builders, who can walk away the day you sell. You do not control the imported hardware every piece requires. You do not control the raw lumber price. The Wall Street Journal documented that when supply chains seized up, lead times doubled, and prices rose by 20 to 30%. The builder passed those costs to you, and you passed them to the customer, but you could not pass the delay. A customer who waits 14 weeks for a dining table does not blame the Amish craftsman. They blame the storefront that took their deposit, and that goodwill is fragile, and it belongs to the builder, not to you. So what is this business really? You walked in looking at a furniture showroom with solid hardwood tables, custom finishes, and a brand story built on tradition and trust. You thought you were buying a retail operation with premium margins and a loyal customer base. What you were actually buying is a distribution node in a closed ethnic supply chain, where you control almost nothing. The franchise agreement for AmishBuiltFurniture.com runs a 10-year term, a $40,000 fee, and an initial investment between $100,000 and $200,000. It buys you a showroom, training, and marketing materials. It does not buy you the builder relationships. Those took a man like Mike Finlaw 25 years to build, and they can be given to a dealer down the road who has sold the same craftsman's work for a generation. Your franchise territory means nothing to a builder who sells to 5 different dealers in the same region. You are not buying a moat. You are buying a pass to stand in line. The builders hold the leverage. The franchisor holds the brand. The customer holds the expectation. You hold the lease, the insurance, and the risk. The furniture is beautiful. The numbers are not. The showroom is real. The leverage is not. That is what this business really is.